You already know where to reach me. Up above or below. You can reach me at those contact pathways. Now, today I want to get right to it. I want to talk about the World Cup, being that we're a few hours away from its inauguration. So, I'm a Mexican of Mexican descent, and it's a big deal in our community. The World Cup is huge. The World Cup is every 4 years, and I checked out a little stat that actually said that Mexicans and its national team are the team and country that has lost the most games out of all national teams. And mainly it's because we've been to so many and have never won a World Cup. Now, the reason for us being to so many World Cups is because the area in which we compete in, North America and Central America, is relatively weak and lacking in competition. This being because we play little teams like Haiti and Guatemala and El Salvador, and not to say anything bad of them. I know a lot of people from these countries. They're good, hard-working people. But, you know, their countries are just not capable of laying out an infrastructure that's conducive to good soccer teams. So, being that competition is of a lowly nature in our area, Mexico usually makes the World Cup every 4 years. Now, I want to touch on the subject of the World Cup because I read a couple of articles that spoke about the negative effects to the hosting nation of these big sporting events. 2010, an article in I believe it's the World Economic Forum, claimed that in South Africa, which was the hosting country in that World Cup 8 years ago, chose locations and sites for their meets and actually evicted all low-income residents, which they felt were really portraying their country in the best light. That's pretty rough. That's actually pretty disgusting. Also, in the NPR article 4 years ago, the World Cup was in Brazil. And it actually talked about the stadiums that were built for this World Cup and what they're actually being used for today in 2018. The biggest stadium built is actually used as a depot for buses, a parking lot. The other stadiums that were built are being auctioned off to the highest bidder in the private sector. So, once again, this is a case of the people put the money down for the big projects that the government wants to undertake. They don't result as promised by the government, yet the people are left holding the bags again. Okay, these two stadiums in Brazil, one is being loitered by homeless and just has to be sold off because it's costing the city an enormous amount of money and not bringing a single penny into the city's economy. Also, in one of these states in Brazil where one of these stadiums was built, a project was being promised by the governor and other World Cup organizers in this state, and they're being investigated currently for this big promise that they had of building, I believe it was either a railway or a subway from the airport to the downtown of the city. And it was supposed to be built before the World Cup in 2014. And of the 14-mile track that this was going to take, I believe the article said not even 2 miles have been built to date. Yet over $100 million was taxed for this project. So it always boils down to politics, and this is one of my arguments for being a libertarian and no longer supporting these huge welfare states that are being promoted across the world by Democrats and left-leaning individuals. Left-leaning meaning ideas that the government must provide health care to all its citizens, that government must provide money to people that can't afford certain things. And this is my point. The point is that all these projects that people with these ideologies have come from taxes. Okay? And taxes are coming from one source, and that is the productive individuals of said country or said nation. And the more taxes that we give to the government for projects, regardless of the projects, they are always mishandled. Okay? Always. The more money we give government for these big projects, the more money that politicians can skim off the top, keep for themselves, spread them out throughout their shell companies, and play with the accounting of the municipalities, states, and countries. Okay? In the United States, if you didn't know, in the United States, for every taxed dollar received by the municipality, by the state, or by any special group that is not spent, has to be returned to the government. So, what I'm trying to say is every dollar you get taxed, every dollar you sent off to your local, state, or national government that is not spent by them gets returned. Therefore, their budget gets reduced. So, what's their incentive? Their incentive, the politicians' incentive, is to always spend every taxed dollar so they can say, look, we went over budget. We need more taxes, more money from the people, from you people. See, the politicians have no incentive to make the government smaller, to tax less. Never will that be the intention of the politicians, no matter what they say. No matter what they say. So, going back to this big sporting event tangent. The governing bodies, for example, FIFA, the governing body of soccer and the World Cup internationally, globally, doesn't put a dime down out of their pockets, yet they create billions of dollars of revenue for themselves when these big sporting events take place. Need I say more? The governing body of the Olympics. I don't have the acronym right now off the top of my head, but what I do know is that this last Olympics, they took 70% of the television revenue and 30% was for the organizing nation. Okay, let's get that ingrained in our brains. The organizing bodies that don't put a single dime down. See, basically they just go into the country and they make the deals with the politicians. The politicians then tax the people. This money that's being taxed is then used to create an infrastructure for these big sporting events. And then from these big sporting events, the revenue, for the most part, is kept by the governing bodies of these institutions that put their name behind these organized sporting events. So where do I go with all this? I love the World Cup. I love sports. But there has to be a better way. Okay, in this NPR article that mainly focused on Brazil's World Cup said that what was spent, I believe, on the infrastructure for the World Cup could have paid the budget of their welfare state twice over. Now, whether that's just speculation and just being thrown out there to chastise the politicians that mishandled the money, that's neither here nor there. But the point is, massive amounts of money is placed in the hands of very few people when these big sporting events occur. And the boost in economy that the people are promised for doing these things are only transient. So they only happen at the beginning or right after the big sporting events. In fact, you can look this up. The tourism promised, the increased tourism promised to some of these countries due to the organization of these big sporting events is actually false, because people that like to go tour other countries have money, so they're relatively smart. So they're gonna think, and they do think, this has already been proven, okay, they're holding this big event, they're holding the Olympics, they're holding the World Cup, the whatever it is, they're holding it in this country. So that means they think too many people are going to be there. So why tour a country that's going to be saturated with people when I can go to a different country and just leave this one for another time? Okay, see, they always flip it on us, man. So if you're still a believer in these big welfare programs and these big welfare projects, man, good luck to you. But I'm going to be fighting however I can. Right now, I can't fight economically. One day I will. But right now, I can't. So all I can do is try to tell people about the truth. And hope that I clarify it enough to where they get a eureka moment. And then they go and tell somebody else about it. Peace.